Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is the stories we tell. The stories we tell are one of the most, if not the most powerful determiner of our experience. And therefore, it's critically important that we curate them with conscious care. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And it should be an interesting conversation. Before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale, exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, all your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale, exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together, vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good morning. Good morning, Rosalind. So great to have you here with us this morning, and welcome to everybody else who's joining us. I want to mention that I was told yesterday that someone had joined us in the morning and actually made comments, and I didn't see and therefore didn't respond to the comments. And I just want to give you a heads up that somehow, because of the way that things are configured with the platform that we're streaming through, that the only comments I see are comments that are logged in on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page or YouTube channel. I don't seem to see any comments that are put on my page directly. So if you want to be responded to in the comments, if you want me to see them, you need to go to either the Enlightened World Network Facebook page or YouTube channel. So that said, the stories we tell, and I talk about this a lot, about how important it is to curate our stories. But we all know that we have the ability, or I hope we all know by now, that we have the ability to work ourselves into an emotional state through the stories that we tell. So we can get ourselves into a state of peace and connection and joy, or we can get ourselves into a state of despair and sadness and hopelessness. We are incredibly powerful wizards in this regard. And when we get ourselves into those emotional states, what happens is that there is corresponding chemistry that gets generated. So anxiety, we get cortisol, we get all kinds of disruptors and imbalances that are created in our bodies when we generate negative emotion, anger, frustration. These emotions, just like emotions of bliss and joy and love, have a chemical cascading effect. So it's not an abstract conversation to say that our stories create our reality, because then when we have these cascades of chemicals, we get into sort of a spiral of experience that is not just in big air quotes emotional. It's experiential on a very real level, on a chemical level, a very physical level, and obviously an experiential level. The chemistry helps to dictate our experience, which then helps to dictate further thoughts, which then helps to, as you see, create this spiral. So curating our stories, being conscious and deliberate about the stories that we tell, is an incredibly important thing, not only to our mental health, but to our physical health as well. So Rosalind says, how to tell a different story around addiction. Instead of reaching for substance, what habit or thoughts can it be replaced with to replace the intense craving? So this is actually a good example of how our thoughts create experience. And yes, there is such a thing as physical addiction or physical chemistry that helps to support addiction. And interestingly, there are many paths to intervention, right? There's chemical paths to intervention. There's psycho-based or psychologically or psyche-based paths to intervention, cognitive paths to intervention, etc. Addiction's a challenging thing, and I'm not an expert, so there's my disclaimer right from the outset. I'm not an expert in addiction. In fact, the work that I do, I won't do with people that are in active addiction because it can be triggering. So that really kind of disqualifies me from being able to have any kind of definitive conversation around addiction. However, I can talk about thought patterns, which can be, maybe that can be viewed as an addiction. And that is something that I've seen radical transformation in. You know, like we become acclimated to certain chemistry sets in our being. So if we have a history of depression, what's happening is that we have a convergence of certain thought patterns and certain chemical sets that feed each other. It's like this cycle that feeds itself. And when we can, what I notice in terms of successful intervention around these thought addictions, I'll call them, for and that's, we're going to say it's a loosely held term, although there is a physical component to or connected with those thought patterns, as we just described. What I notice about successful intervention is that it incorporates multiple dimensions of being. What I mean by that is it incorporates physical awareness and experience of physical sensation. So part of the core connection process is to experience whatever we're experiencing, whatever the emotion is, in the body. In the body. And so there's a cognitive experience that someone generates, a thought that is often coming from the other than conscious intelligence. I don't say unconscious because that sounds like it's a lesser thing. So I say other than conscious. And that thought, then we associate with an emotion. Okay, what's that scene that you're seeing? What's the emotion? Where is that emotion located in your body? And what is the sensation associated with the experience of the emotion? So we're taking the dimension of thought, cognition, or ideation, because we're working in a liminal, in between space, like a semi dream space in a way, and also called an imaginal space, meaning it can be based on reality, but it's not pure flights of fancy that are unrelated in any way, but they're kind of a conscious imagination and emergence, we'll call it. And then connecting that cognitive process with an emotional experience, and then a visceral physical experience, all from a place of observation, non-judgment, experiential awareness. That's what we're looking at. And so from this place of experience and witnessing, so the witness is the non-judgmental awareness of each of these aspects. We'll then say, okay, the feeling, you're feeling the feeling. If that feeling had an appearance, what would it look like? So abstracting that feeling, bringing it back into reconnect with the cognitive experience. So we're connecting, essentially, really what it is connecting body, mind, and spirit, and enabling this interaction from a non-judgmental place that then allows an unfolding of change. Because as we allow ourselves to observe without judgment, what's happening is we're holding with open hand, we're allowing change. We're allowing things to be as they are. And the nature of being is change. So what happens is the emotion starts shifting, or the appearance of whatever it was we were visualizing starts to change, or the sensation of the emotion in our body starts to change. And as we notice one thing changing, we then notice changes in the other things that were related. And this is without actively trying to dictate or direct that change. This is simply being present. So this notion of presence comes from as a counterpoint to resistance. So one of the things that prohibits change, or that impedes change, is resistance. And it's resistance that embeds the patterns even more deeply. So when we have an emotion such as sadness, and we don't allow ourselves to experience that emotion, as we press it away, as we resist it, what happens is we're making it more deeply entrenched. And we've probably all heard the phrase, What you resist persists, which is true. What happens is it's like a splinter that we're pushing more deeply into our flesh so that it becomes embedded and entrenched. So I want to get back to the stories. Our resistance is often founded in our stories, like not being willing to experience sadness because maybe we consider that it's not important. Maybe we consider that we're fearful that we might get lost in the experience of that emotion. Or we may consider, like a story that we tell ourselves is that having emotion is weak. And I invite you to consider that having emotion is part of our humanness, like that maybe that mechanism is there as a way that we are able to be healthy, that it's part of our lives, that it's part of the mechanism, the system that we are, and that it's important. It's important to notice the emotions, that they have something to teach us, that they allow us a way to release energy. We are energetic beings. And so our emotions allow us an expression of energy. However, we can generate emotion by the stories we tell. And curating those stories is really important. So particularly, and just a reminder here, if you're leaving comments, I can't see your comments unless you're on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page, not my page personally, okay? So I appreciate your engagement so deeply. If I'm not responding to your comments, it's because I don't see them, okay? So let's get back to this notion of the stories we tell, particularly when we are facing a situation that we don't like. And lots of us are facing situations that we don't like, and situations that cause deep upset when we tell stories that are upsetting. And so if we can change our story, it allows us to change our state. When we change our state, we change our chemistry. When we change our chemistry, we impact our health. And the bottom line to all of this is choice and recognizing that there's nothing more impactful and important than that we can do than changing or curating our stories and our own state and our well-being. If we work ourselves into a state of panic, anxiety, fear, anger, the chemistry of those emotions will consume us, literally will negatively impact our health and well-being in a very literal way. There is a consequence to the stories that we tell. It's just all you have to do is connect the dots and see that there is a consequence. And so curating our stories is probably one of, if not the most important thing we can do to be able to make a difference in the world. Because if we're incapacitated, how can we be present and engaged. So in the space of circumstances that we do not like, and maybe even circumstances that we abhor and we have some fear about, there are several things we can do. One is notice the stories, notice the things we're saying, because we're creating our reality in the speaking of those stories. This is true. We are creating our own experience and the lens through which we live our lives through the stories that we tell. So if we're telling stories of doom and gloom, of course, we're going to experience hopelessness and despair. And how does that serve you? How does that serve the world? Other than to maybe motivate us to take some kind of action that then might empower us to move beyond the doom and gloom into some sense of hopefulness. So those emotions can be powerful activators as long as we don't live there on a permanent basis. So one of the things that helps me the most is the practice of deepening into the notion that life is happening for me and through me. Life is expressing itself through me rather than to me. Life is happening for me and through me rather than to me. I am not a victim. Life is serving me. And it takes a deliberate and conscious intention to be deepening into that notion as a practice, as a lens through which we perceive and experience the world. Why? Because that lens requires us or directs us to look at life as opportunity, to look at obstacle as opportunity. To say, okay, I may not understand how, but life is happening for me and through me, even in this crazy circumstance that I don't like. What then is the opportunity? And Rosalind says, taking accountability for self, 100%. The most important thing we can do is to be response able and to take our stories in hand and consciously generate stories that support us in our lives. Create a lens that supports us. So again, for me, one of the most powerful practices is deepening into life is happening for me and through me rather than to me. That is an empowerment, a statement of empowerment on so many different levels. So I'm an expression of life. Life is happening for me. So there's a nurturing, there's opportunities, there's a gift. It's a gift. Even when it doesn't look the way we think we want it to look. Some of our greatest gifts have come through our greatest challenges. I see it in myself, in my own life. I see it in multitudes of people. that what seemed like the greatest and often most devastating challenges turned out to be the greatest gifts in hindsight. What if we could receive those gifts as they're occurring? Just imagine the suffering and pain that we could spare ourselves and everybody around us if we could adopt that lens and be open to the opportunities that present themselves. So that's it for today. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. Rosalind says, sometimes it's safe to just stay in my lane. Well, yes, we each have our lanes, and we have the opportunity to expand our lane, but to be living our paths is what we're here to do. And as always, it is such a pleasure and privilege to have the opportunity to connect and communicate together and to engage in these musings about what it is to be human. So until next time, so much love to you.